Aw, man, Darren Dreger, why'd you have to go out there and do this? Come on, buddy, come on. Today, we're making a video talking about the Calgary Flames and a player on their roster who has been the subject of some particular trade conversations the past few months. Lo and behold, he is probably the best player on the team in terms of producing points. At least he was last year. He was the number one player on Calgary in the goals and points column. You know him none other than Nazem Kadri. And today, we are diving into what the Nazem Kadri trade board could be looking like, because Darren Dreger went out there and made a really interesting comment about it. Now, firstly, let's just dive into the situation right here. Nazem Kadri, by all accounts, is still a pretty good NHL player. This previous season, he scored himself 67 points in a full 82-game season, which follows up a 75-point campaign with the Flames and 56 points the year before that. The year before he was playing in Calgary, though, hey, he was in Colorado. He had 87 points in 71 games and 15 points in 16 games in the playoffs, as the Avalanche went on to win the Stanley Cup. So, yeah, Kadri's a Stanley Cup champion. He got his ring, and then he departed the Colorado Avalanche and said, hey, those Flames, they're offering me $7 million a year over the next 7 years to play for them, and that's why he's on the deal that he's on now. He's 34 years old, signed on till the end of 28-29, making $7 million apiece. That's a pretty beefy contract, but considering how much the cap is going up, I think honestly $7 million, that's not that bad. If the cap literally doubles to the point where point-per-game players are making $12 million, I think $7 million is going to be fine, even if Kadri trails off a little bit, which he has ever since joining the Calgary Flames. He was never going to be able to replicate that way over point-per-game season he had with the Avalanche. But the Calgary Flames, of course, are not the Colorado Avalanche, and despite the fact that they have been weaker, Kadri has still produced. He was the number one point guy on the team last year, and he led the team in goals. However, because the Flames could be argued to be going down this sort of retool, rebuilding-ish process, where they question whether or not a guy like Kadri, who's 34 years old, is really going to be useful to the team and what they're trying to do, now you're talking about trades. And this is exactly what Darren Dreger brought up on the Barn Burner podcast earlier yesterday. There'd be many teams with interest in Nazem Kadri, not just the Leafs, but the Canucks need some help. The Canadiens go around the league, but then what does Calgary do? It's going to take a tremendous overpay. So, yeah, there you go. Thanks, Darren Dreger, for going out there and linking the Canucks and the Canadiens to Nazem Kadri. The Toronto conversation makes sense to me, by the way. Like, this is a guy that was a Maple Leaf. He was drafted by Toronto. He was beloved in Toronto when he was scoring points and not getting into the box. But the Kadri-Toronto experiment definitely ended on a sour note. The multiple suspensions in the playoffs, which cost the Maple Leafs playoff success, the sort of attitude and stuff that would be percolating underneath the surface there. It's not like Kadri was a bad Leaf, it's just he had a lot of bad moments as a Leaf. And even though the Toronto Maple Leafs are in a spot where their top two centers are Matthews and Tavares, if you wanted to run it back, you wanted to bring back Kadri for some more depth down the middle, maybe if you're able to get him on some salary retained, you could reignite that trio down center. Now, you might not even need to do the entire salary retention thing because Toronto's making a lot of savings now that they left Mitch Marner out in Vegas and they didn't re-sign John Tavares to a super expensive contract. No longer is the core four terrorizing the NHL and the Toronto Maple Leafs cap structure. Now the label core four can be attached to the Oilers, but that's neither here nor there. Nazem Kadri as a potential Toronto Maple Leafs target would fit in right with their path, their timeline, if the Leafs are going to try to take advantage of a Barkov and Tkachuk-less Florida Panthers squad this year, then maybe going out there and acquiring a 34-year-old Nazem Kadri who is still able to produce, maybe that would be a pretty reasonable move. I do question, though, how much his production will decline if he was on the Toronto Maple Leafs, because Cough, cough, sorry, but Nazem Kadri wouldn't be a first-line center with the Maple Leafs like he is in Calgary. He would be third-line center, unless they were to play him on the wing, or unless they were to put Tavares or Matthews on the wing. It just doesn't really make sense there for Kadri himself to be like, yeah, I want to go over there because that team is going to give me the best opportunity to allow me to contribute whilst being in a competitive situation. I mean, he's got a no-move clause right now, so obviously he would be in control of that. But that's why we also got to talk about some of these other teams. The Montreal Canadiens and the Vancouver Canucks are also listed as potential trade destinations. Vancouver has a spot right there behind Elias Pettersson for Nazem Kadri. Filipino has been pretty good. I'm not going to deny what he has shown off in the preseason so far. Nazem Kadri, though, is just technically better. And I would understand that if you were to put Kindel in the third line, Demo Ratu, or do something with Teddy Bluger, then you would essentially be giving Kindel the same developmental issues that he had with the New York Rangers. Not enough trust to play him second line, thus no development. But Nazem Kadri is just that much better, and I'd say that if he's able to guarantee 60-plus points, that's a very quality second-line center that you're not necessarily able to guarantee out of Kindel either. So I do think that Kadri would be an upgrade, especially having him alongside of a Jonathan Lekkerimäki or something. Kadri with a Garland would be super difficult to play against, just the tenacity on that duo. I love the idea of Nazem Kadri in Vancouver, at least in the short term, when you consider just how productive he can be. But if Vancouver wants to play a more run-and-gun style of game, obviously Filipino is more well-equipped to do that. Kadri, while he does have some wheels, he is 34, so you can't really guarantee that he's going to be able to do that for a full season. I get it, top players like Kadri, and I say top players because he literally was the #1 Calgary point guy, and he was a former first-round pick in the top 10. Top guys should be able to have better conditioning well into their later careers, but you can't afford to take any chances here. Filipino, on the other hand, he's 26, he's right there in his prime, and he's skating like the wind out there when Rick Tocchet isn't in his ear telling him to dump and chase. As for the Montreal Canadiens, they're in a spot where they just solidified their roster earlier this morning. We have ourselves another preseason game against the Ottawa Senators that's going to be interesting, but Montreal essentially has their guys in play. They have Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach, and I guess you could say Jake Evans and Oliver Kapanen all in that center position. Sure, Kadri would be an upgrade over 3 out of 4 of those guys. But how much do you want to exercise your right in pushing the rest of those guys down? You want development out of Dach. You want Kapanen to be able to take the next step. You want Evans to stabilize and still be consistent in the ways that he has been the past few years. If you get a Kadri, you would technically be slowing that down. Now, he would be an upgrade, that's the thing, but I do question if Montreal's in a spot to really doubt what Kadri brings versus the short-term developmental setbacks it would bring for their younger guys. Vancouver is in a more competitive spot, I'd say, compared to Montreal, so I could understand from their point of view why they'd make a trade like this. But for Montreal, I don't know if there's really much benefit longer term, which seems to be what their focus is heading into this upcoming campaign. Now, as for the trade return, hey, that's an entirely other conversation. Darren Dreger here is saying that it would take an overpayment, so if you're a fan of the Canucks, the Flames, Canadiens, or the Toronto Maple Leafs, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What does an overpayment for Nazem Kadri look like to you? If you're a fan of the Habs, Leafs, or Canucks, then let me know in the comments, do you think Nazem Kadri is worth the squeeze here? Is he worth it to acquire for your favorite team? If you enjoyed this video at any point, feel free to hit the like button. If you did not, then hey, the dislike button's down there for you. Comments help out with the algorithm, so feel free to get involved in the conversation. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign on, and bye.